just a mess. It's just a mess. So I wrote a piece yesterday that has gone through a couple titles at this point. But basically,
Is it just titled Google What the
Hi, and welcome to the Android Police podcast for the week of November 29th, 2024. I am your humble host, Will Sattelberg. Just jumping in here really quick because what you're about to hear is the second half of the episode that Daniel and I recorded last week. We recorded for almost 2 hours, so instead of not publishing anything this week, it just made more sense to split it into two. You're going to hear whatever we talked about last week. Frankly, I don't remember. I'm on a turkey hangover. So happy Thanksgiving. I hope you had a great holiday wherever you're listening to this, and we'll be back with a new episode next week. So enjoy.
The story of how I have two computers in the same room is a long one that I won't get into today. But suffice it to say, where I'm sitting right now was supposed to be my content creator desk.
Okay.
So when I first started, not this job, but my last job, I was going to have a standing desk. And then this one was supposed to have nothing on it except for a camera over, like the hanging camera for unboxings. And then I got real tired of standing all day and just put a monitor and a laptop on this desk, and then slowly became a gremlin or a goblin and not a gremlin, a goblin, and started sitting.
Yeah, you can safely eat past midnight, I think is
that what is that?
I don't
the
know.
gremlin
I've
or the
seen
goblin?
gremlins like two gremlins, right? Isn't it like you can't feed them past midnight?
I haven't seen
am I wrong
it since
on
the
this?
80s. I don't know.
You sound fine. You're too worried about it. It's 1 week. But I wish you would film more unboxings. Not that we do any unboxings anymore, because who cares? But you should go back to that.
I should. I want to.
The other thing about standing desks is that it's a good idea until you get a standing desk that is stuck as a standing desk. You really need the ability to move up and down. That's crucial.
Yeah, my whole thing, like, this is a jury-rigged standing desk because if you can look behind me, they're actually standing on a bunch of tower speakers that I inherited from my dad.
I thought they were tower speakers. I couldn't tell.
Back in the day, it was a really cool setup because I had a really good Yamaha AV receiver on the desk that was propping up the monitor. So anytime I wanted to like blast music, I would just turn on the receiver and it would literally, the music would come like at my legs, which isn't the best soundstage, but it was extremely good quality. But I so rarely used it because it was an AV receiver that wasn't hooked up to anything. Actually, sort of a Black Friday aside, there's this product, because I want to start using those speakers again, that it's basically a receiver that you can plug old school unpowered speakers into with, coaxial speaker cable and hook it up to AirPlay and Cast and Alexa and actually just use it like you would any other streaming service. So I could like stream YouTube music from it without turning on. I mean, you just turn on the speakers, the receiver, and that's on sale for Black Friday. And I'm very interested in this product, but it's still expensive, right? These are like, it's still an AV receiver, but it's a small little box. It's called the Wiim Amp Pro, WIIM Amp Pro.
I have seen this. Because every time I see the name, I'm like, yeah, it's the sequel to the Wii U, the Wii Amp.
You could emulate Wii games on it, actually.
Exactly. It truly, like, every time I see it, I'm like, is this like a Wii accessory? Like, it's not. It's a very expensive receiver.
I should buy it before Nintendo actually sends a DMCA takedown request and just like sues it out of oblivion.
Absolutely. The logo kind of looks like the Wii logo. Anyway,
okay, let's talk about the Pixel Tablet 2. So,
and 3, kind of.
And 3. So this is weird.
Let me walk through the timeline because it's very helpful. Silly. It's deeply silly. So a week ago, we heard rumors about the Pixel Tablet 2 potentially like having a keyboard accessory, which is not something that Google had for the original Pixel tablet last year. a lot of people were like, that seems like a big mistake. Like, there are third-party options, but you really should have, like, Google should be selling a productivity tool for their tablet. Then this week, I believe Android headlines reported that they had heard that the Pixel Tablet 3 had been canceled and not and that like the Pixel Tablet 2 would be the end of the line whenever that releases, presumably next year. And then like a day or two later, Michal at Android Authority reported that no, it was the Pixel Tablet 2 was canceled. The Pixel Tablet 3 might still be in the works, which is just a mess. It's just a mess. So I wrote a piece yesterday that has gone through a couple titles at this point. But basically,
is it just titled "Google? What the f are you doing?" Like, is that
if I was allowed to publish that title on the website, it would have been called that, because that was basically my like reaction to this entire thing. Because like every review of the Pixel tablet is like, yeah, it's good enough, but boy, is there a lot of room for this concept to be pulled off better, right? Like everyone was like, you know, you look at Taylor Kearns' review for us from a year and a half ago, and it's like, yeah, I like the overall hardware. I really like the speaker dock is not very good. I wish it was louder. I wish it had cast support. You know, I wish the display on the Pixel tablet wasn't 60 hertz. Taylor said he was fine with it being an LCD because it's supposed to be this like hybrid smart home device. OLED wouldn't make a lot of sense, but there were problems with this hardware that could have been improved in a second gen model. And you and I, Daniel, talked about this on the podcast, right? Like leading up to, because God, the Pixel tablet was unveiled a full year before, over a year before it went on sale. And we had conversations of like, this thing needs to undercut the iPad or it's DOA, and it didn't undercut the iPad. And I forgot until I wrote this that like when Google in May announced a dockless version of the Pixel tablet, they did so an hour after Apple cut the price of the 10th gen iPad by $100, literally an hour later. So it's just been like a rough year and a half of existence for this tablet. I think it was a good idea. I wouldn't call it a good idea poorly executed, but it was kind of a half-assed idea is what I would say. And that sucks because I think it's a good concept.
I would argue it was poorly executed.
Sure.
Because
all of the smart home stuff is not very good.
It's not even not very good. It's basically unusable.
Sure.
And the speaker, which should have been the most important part, was also so underwhelming that it's more of a liability than an asset, because the idea is to put this in a big room where everybody can view the tablet and have a shared device that will allow for, quote, room filling sound. And the speaker is barely loud enough to hear across a room. Never mind fill it with like good quality audio. It's the same quality as a Nest Hub.
Not even. It reminds me of like those iHome accessories from 15 years ago, where they were little speakers that had like a little space for you to put your like iPod Touch and just plugged into the 3.5 millimeter jack. And they were like $40 at Walmart, and they sounded like shit, but they were louder than the built-in speaker on your iPod Touch. So like, plug it in. That perfect Christmas gift, right? For any 14-year-old. I don't know. No, I remember my hands-on with the Pixel tablet at I/O 2023, where like the person in charge of like the demo was like, "Oh, let me play a song for you," and played like a Billie Eilish song. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, cool. Can I turn it up?" Because I was like, "That's pretty quiet." It was at like 80% volume already. And I was like, "Oh, that's not good." I would have guessed this was at like 30% volume when I first heard it. Yeah, so it's just not good. And then they, I think the logic behind having it in every box was like made sense if hub mode had been equivalent to how a Nest display works, but it's not. And so the whole thing was like they didn't want to commit to it. And the concept of a Pixel tablet 2 was so alluring to me, because it's like, well, if they just fix, like, everyone has the same complaints about this. So if they just like go down the list and fix it, that's a pretty good tablet. That's a pretty good Nest Hub Max replacement, right? Especially like I argue this in the piece of like, God, like we're waiting for some kind of like Gemini powered smart display because it's not going to be the current Nest products, and God knows when we'll get a new one. This could be that, right? The Pixel tab. It's so easy to imagine the Pixel Tablet 2 being like the smart display for the Gemini era. You want to talk about AI agents? Like here you go, right? And no, apparently not. Apparently, just like it didn't sell well enough. So why try again? Did it not sell because I don't think I've ever seen an advertisement for this thing when I see Pixel phone ads all the time? Maybe. Did it not sell because it's always been more expensive than the iPad? Probably. But, no, let's just throw in the towel, which is like the Google way. And it's so frustrating of like you refuse to let a thing find its footing, which is weird because we're only kind of just starting to see the Pixel phone lineup like really be successful in North America, right? Like by Google's metrics. It's not on par with Apple and Samsung yet, but it has been a lot of good news in the post Pixel 9 world. The original Pixel was 2016. It's taken a long time to get here with lots of missteps. And so for Google to just be like, you know what? It's not even worth doing this idea again. Or maybe we'll do it in 2027 with what was once the planned Pixel Tablet 3. I don't know. I find it really frustrating. And it's not like there isn't space to compete in the world of tablets. Like, I think Apple is pretty much phoning it in at this point. I think Samsung is pretty much phoning it in at this point. And I think the idea of like this thing becomes a smart display when you aren't using it is a good concept that just wasn't well executed in this original model.
There's just the market reality of Google not really making Android compelling enough on the tablet to compete with the iPad, which has had a separate operating system for many years now and has the apps to back it up, and Samsung, which has a full line of inexpensive tablets for consumers, not to mention Amazon, that has also carved a fairly lucrative niche with the Kindles or with the Fire tablets. And this Pixel tablet, it didn't make an impact. It tried to toe this line between premium and budget, and it didn't do either of those things well.
Right.
It was too big for most people, and the gimmick wasn't good enough. It was just it was a bad gimmick, right?
It was certainly a poorly executed gimmick. I still think it makes sense, right? Like on paper, it's just that you have to fully commit to doing this idea. You have to like maximize its utility. It can't be worse than a Nest Hub Max at being a smart display. It has to be better than it. Yeah. And it's not. It like by any metric that like even though the Nest Hub Max is from 2019, right? Like it's not a new product. I don't know.
So it doesn't surprise me that they're going back to the drawing board on the Pixel tablet. It would definitely not surprise me to get out of the space entirely, given that this is now basically the third time that Google has exited the space. We had how many years of Nexus tablets? We had the Nexus 7, Nexus 9, Nexus 10. Nexus 7, Nexus 10, Nexus 9. Then we had the Pixel Book, the Pixel Slate. Now we're not even talking about the rumor that Google is going to like deprecate Chrome OS in favor of Android here.
Which
this I think is okay. So actually, we didn't put this on the show notes, but we have to talk about this.
No, I have it in the show notes. It's fourth. It's the fourth thing in this.
Oh,
section.
Sorry.
But yes, right. Yes.
I missed that. So this, I think, is the biggest news of the week.
Sure.
It is. I think.
No. The only reason I'm not saying hard yes is because it's so stupid. I struggle to believe it. I think this is so dumb.
I absolutely agree with you here. There is no way that this rumor pans out in its current format.
No. Right?
So just to be clear, the rumor states that in order to better compete with the existing mobile-focused tablet,
like specifically the iPad is
which is iPad OS.
Yes.
And Apple's continued inability to make iPad OS into a crossover operating system. So I don't even know why Google is approaching this from that perspective. Chrome OS will eventually be integrated somewhat into Android. Now, it's unclear what this means at this juncture. So the options are like, you might be able to buy a Chromebook that just runs Android in the desktop, right? Like there's that option, which is a fairly low friction, with newer versions of Android, there's a desktop mode. It allows for windowing, and Android can technically run some Linux applications through emulation. So you might get the ability to run native apps on Android through an emulation layer with powerful enough hardware. And you get native Android apps that with windowing can be as good, if not better than some like web versions. Right. And you eventually may get to the point where, and this is the most important part, Chrome runs natively as a desktop class operating system on Android. Right. With the right screen size and aspect ratio and viewport and chip and blah, 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 you may just get desktop Chrome on some Android devices, right? But the back, like the underlying structure of the operating system will be Android. And we've seen over the years that there have been pushes to integrate Chrome OS and Android better. And we've also heard rumors that Google is bringing elements of Chrome OS into Android, right? Android 8 and Android 16, I believe, or was it 15 QPR beta 2?
It might have been QPR 2 has a terminal in it.
It has Terminux, or sorry, it has a native Linux terminal, but it also upgrades the Linux kernel to like a very new version. Right. All of these things could be laying the groundwork for Android to just be a much more robust operating system for desktop class use cases than it currently is.
Yeah.
All that being said,
yeah,
Chrome OS is a very, very different value prop than Android.
Correct.
And part of the beauty of Chrome OS is that it's not clunky. It's not clunky. It just works. When have you ever been able to say that about anything that runs Android outside of a phone? Ever?
Never.
You've never. No, I was.
I know it's. Yes, I know it's rhetorical, but I'm gonna answer. It's like no. It's always been a problem. Well, and so not just this is where I come in. I don't want to say I doubt it. This is coming from like Michal, right? Like Michal has a great track record. I don't doubt that he's heard this, but it has to be the idea of like Android, as you're saying, like just becomes like the backbone, but Chrome OS looks relatively unchanged, right? Or like it makes Android apps work better than they do now, but you don't have to worry about like compatibility issues as much, right? But like to me, Chrome OS, when I think of where has Chrome OS found the most success, it's in enterprise settings and it's in schools, right? And those are two groups that like are not looking for any kind of radical change. They want to know how that device is going to work. And they don't want it to change for the 10 years that a Chromebook is supported. So if this is happening, then I think it's happening in a way where it won't be noticeable to the end user beyond like maybe apps work better, right? Like, or like power users can really go in and like change things, but like the core Chrome OS, like I can't. So like part of an attached rumor to this is that like there is a Pixel laptop in the works that could potentially run this like desktop version of Android. And I just like, I don't see it happening in a world where it's like, it's going to, it will still look like Chrome OS would be my guess. Should that happen, I just cannot see the enterprise world being like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like it's just a completely different platform now. That's not a problem with us. Like, I don't know. Am I crazy here? Am I thinking too much about the business side of this?
Well, I mean, it's all the business side of it, right?
Sure.
I think Google sees the writing on the wall that Chrome OS is far less dominant in the education space than it used to be.
Sure.
A lot of school boards that used to have major contracts with like ASUS and Acer and HP deploying hundreds or thousands of Chromebooks have clawed them back due to reliability problems, right? I think Windows has a much better value prop on ARM than it did 2 years ago. And the potential for low-cost ARM-based Windows laptops to just replace all Chromebooks is very large. I will also tell you that I have a friend who told me last week that his daughter, he's based in Southern California, just outside of LA, that their entire school board got rid of their Chromebooks in favor of Linux laptops running Ubuntu. I swear to God that their contract ran out with one of the vendors.
Okay.
And they felt like the reliability of a slightly higher quality piece of hardware with the lower maintenance costs of just deploying Ubuntu would be better for students in the long run. And like, I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true either.
I think like he has seen the laptop. He knows that part of the beauty of a Chromebook is that it's easy to manage from an MDM perspective.
Yeah.
And it's extremely secure and locked down. And that is not true of Ubuntu, right? There are some privacy controls built into Ubuntu, but there are no, from his understanding and mine, education-specific versions of Ubuntu that could just be deployed en masse.
Yeah.
But like, this is always going to be the issue.
Yeah.
There's the hardware cost, there's the software cost, which in this case is zero, but then there's the deployment and maintenance costs on the IT side that there are already so many vendors that have MDM integrations into Android that are better and more secure than there are for Chrome OS. So let's just unify them and leverage the built-in infrastructure for Android on enterprise as a way of lowering costs for potential hardware vendors, which will then make it more competitive with Windows and, I don't know, for some school boards in California, Linux. And again, if it goes back to you get a desktop class browser, which is really the only prerequisite for making Chrome OS on Android a usable experience, you're fine, right? It's already got decent mouse and keyboard support, and it's improving with Android 16. Windowing on desktop, Android desktop, is already getting better and will get better again with Android 16. And Chrome OS can already run Android apps pretty well. So yeah, I mean, from my perspective, like, this makes sense from a business perspective.
Yeah.
But from a user experience perspective, I am not so sure. And I always have in the back of my mind this idea that Android is just jankier than Chrome OS, and that will be noticeable.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
I'm waiting to be proven wrong on that.
Yeah. I have nothing else to say on this. It's just it's a waiting game at this point. Like, if this is happening, we'll hear more about it. I'm sure that details about this will continue to leak out, but I just don't think it will be as simple as like one day you will boot up an existing Chromebook and it'll be like, this is just Android now. This just is like if I was running an Android tablet. I just don't think that's what this is going to be.
It's possible. I mean, like, Samsung did it when it converted Android Wear to Tizen.
That's true.
In the early Galaxy watches, and then Google did it with Fuchsia, right? It converted the Nest Hubs.
I kind of think that's like the perfect example where it's like that wasn't noticeable to end users though. Like, no one noticed that really happened. Like, your mom didn't notice her Nest Hub suddenly ran technically like a different operating system. Like,
right, but that's
more what
here.
this will. Yeah, I think that's what we'll be seeing here, where it's not, you don't boot into a desk, like, I guess you boot into a desktop Android mode, but it's not going to look like the Pixel tablet. You know what I mean? I think it'll still look like Chrome OS.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It will still look like Android and Chrome OS can look identical today.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
If it wanted to.
Yeah. No, we're on the same page here.
From my perspective, like, there are both benefits to and potential concerns with that migration.
Yes.
Because if Android ends up feeling jankier than Chrome OS, it will just be a worse experience. But at the same time, Windows 11 is objectively janky too, and that is like coming back. So I don't know. I mean, maybe this is the right move. Like maybe it's also just a cost-cutting measure inside Google, right? That they only have to develop one operating system to be deployed across multiple device types and sizes. The rumor of Google releasing a new Pixel book though, running Android, like that one I don't buy. Particularly
I didn't buy it either.
With the move to cancel the Pixel tablet
right.
too. Now,
right.
Is the rumor of the potential non-cancellation or continuation of the Pixel Tablet 3 and the fact that they're releasing a Pixel book running Android the same rumor? Who knows? That's entirely possible.
That could be. I hope not, but that could be. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I am sure we're not done with this like weird hardware rumor game for Google. I bet this continues to leak over the coming months. So we'll see where it goes.
Okay. Very quickly, because we are already an hour and a half in.
Okay, but we're probably not doing a show next week. So this is a nice little, maybe people shouldn't listen to this in one go, is all I'm saying. Save a little bit of it.
Listen to it twice.
There we go.
You're not going to remember the beginning once you reach the end. So just like listen to it again next week.
You're gonna find hidden stuff in the second listen. It's stuff that you didn't know was in this episode of the podcast. It's a whole new appreciation. Sorry, where were we going with this? My iPhone review? Okay, great. I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is a point lower than I gave the iPhone 15 Pro Max a year ago. I actually thought about giving it a 6.5, and I opted to go half a point higher. This is a phone that hardware-wise...
This is a phone. That's it, folks.
I mean, a little bit. This is a phone that is hardware-wise very similar to last year's iPhone. So if you were lured in by that one, you might also be lured in by this one. I think the iPhone has officially become like capital T to capital B big. It is taller than the last Pro Max iPhone, and I can feel it. And it doesn't use that display space any like smarter. It's just like bigger, but the hardware is still good. Like it is a good phone. I think the camera control button is as bad as we've talked about previously. I don't like using it. I think it's too cumbersome to scroll between camera settings. I think it is too difficult to press down as a shutter button without blurring your photos because you're moving the phone. And I think iOS 18 is like one of the worst version updates Apple has pushed to iOS in a long time. Like the first set of Apple Intelligence features is terrible. We talked about notification summaries already, so I don't want to go too far into it. But as we were saying, like Apple keeps trying to come up with ways to manage your notifications instead of just like essentially copying how Android does it. And with notification summaries, it just buries messages, for example, under one notification that tries to summarize what is happening in your group chat or is happening in a one-on-one conversation. And it's wrong so often. It's not wrong all the time, but it's wrong often enough that you almost always need to open those notifications to have any idea of what's actually being discussed or to see if the blurb you're seeing is correct, which doesn't save you any time. If anything, it makes you have to look at more notifications than you otherwise would. It's just not very good. The other stuff that Apple is promising, pretty much every marquee feature on their Apple Intelligence like website is still coming. It's not here. So otherwise, but like even outside of AI, things like moving icons around the screen is terrible. Android has had this feature literally forever, and yet somehow like Apple, because they've left their like snap mode enabled for icons, like moving an icon around your home screen, you will be frustrated.
It's infuriating. It's what it is.
It does not so make bad.
Sense. It's like a game. Like it's like they built Arkanoid.
It's Calvin Ball. There are no rules. It doesn't like it's you're just trying to like move one icon up a row, and what iOS will do is go, so you wanted all of these icons to also move like down, right? And you're like, no, I didn't. I wanted just that one icon to move up. But that's not how iOS 18 works. And maybe literally no one at Apple has ever used an Android device, so they just think that this is how it's always worked on Android. And that's why they've always fought against allowing users to move icons around, because anytime they've tried it, it's been broken like this. I can't figure it out. It's shockingly bad.
I have to suspect it's a bug.
We've already gotten iOS 18.1 and they didn't fix it if it's a bug, and we went through a whole beta period. Like, I think this is how they want it to work. It's just bad.
I have to believe that it's a bug. For my own sanity, I cannot believe that. I mean, to be fair, I'm using iOS 18.2 beta 3 on my iPhone, sure. And it's still broken.
You wanted those AI emojis, didn't you? Couldn't stay away from those. Those are in iOS 18.
Yeah,
right?
The Gen emojis. Yeah. They're
terrible.
They're excellent.
They're not good. Shout out to Emoji Kitchen. So much better.
Oh yeah, Emoji Kitchen's where it's at.
Yeah, it genuinely is. I love Emoji Kitchen. I hate that we are going down the AI route for this, because the designs that were made for Emoji Kitchen
Emoji Kitchen. I thought you meant Pixel Studio. I was like,
no. Pixel Studio is bad. Yeah. Emoji Kitchen is just the like custom made, like internally made like combinations of emoji that I think are incredible. But anyway, go read my iPhone review. It's like 4,000 words, like all of my phone reviews are. If you sometimes feel like we are too positive and too forgiving towards Apple, I think despite the fact that a 7 out of 10 is a good score on its face, I think you'll feel some kind of satisfaction of me spending 1,000 words dunking on the software here. The other thing I'll say, though, is that I do like the camera system on this, specifically when you customize it with photographic styles, which is, oh my god, it's like, again, it's a tool that makes like absolutely no sense unless you watch a tutorial on it, because Apple's instructions are miserable. But yeah, I basically copied Becca Versace's full gold setting that she shared on this podcast the week I was out, and I like it. I took images of like a few things around Western New York, comparing the Pixel 9 Pro's color processing to how I had my iPhone set up, and I preferred the iPhone shots like most of the time, even if they were sometimes, every now and then, they were maybe a little too saturated, but they were more visually appealing without having to jump into an editing tab than the Pixel 9s, which, I don't know, I'm finding Google's color science to be more and more disappointing as they really lean hard on HDR. I'm missing the contrast and the shadows and even just like richer colors that you don't get from the Pixel until you really start tweaking your color settings.
So I have a slightly different take. I prefer the editing tools on the iPhone.
Sure.
I like that the photographic styles with the new iPhones are non-destructive, yes. and like you can infinitely tweak them and you can eventually find something that you like. On the other hand, I think the straight out of the box photos
yes,
the Pixels are still way better.
Yes.
And my main issue is the telephoto lens on the iPhones compared to the recent crop of Android phones is just bad. Like, compared to the Pixel, it's awful. But like, I've been using the Find X8 Pro, which has a 3 and 6x periscope combo, and both of those are so much better and more versatile and get you better shots that it's really hard to actually use the iPhone's telephoto, because I know that the photos that I'm getting are just they're just going to be disappointing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my main issue. Like, I really wish Apple would just like do something about that telephoto. I don't want it to be a 10x. I want it to be a larger, higher quality sensor.
Yeah.
And they're just not there yet.
What I would say on the Find X8 is that so you have one, and Dom Preston has one, and he shared a couple pieces on it this week. I'm so jealous of the photo samples that he has. He took some incredible shots with this phone that, makes me excited for it's a different camera system, but it's kind of the same. The Find X8 has the Hasselblad color science, right? Yeah, it does.
It does.
It makes me excited for the OnePlus 13, frankly. Like, it's, again, it will be a different camera system, but I don't know. I'm like curious to see how that phone performs, because I actually really liked taking photos with the OnePlus Open. It's like the only foldable I've liked taking photos with. definitely more than the S25. Sorry, Samsung, but it's true. I'm like genuinely as messy as I almost said ColorOS, as messy as OxygenOS is. I don't know.
Well, ColorOS is messy. So my 30-second hot take of this phone, now that I can talk about it, is I hated ColorOS 15 when I first got it.
Yeah.
And I forced myself to use it. It's basically iOS.
Yeah.
And it's more iOS than almost every other iOS clone out there.
And there are
but
a lot
it does
of them.
it but it does it better than most of the clones like Vivo and Huawei and Honor. Like, at least there are some fully fleshed out ideas, even if those ideas are lifted almost entirely from Apple.
Yeah.
Including the Calvin Ball icon shenanigans on the home screen.
Yeah.
But what I like about the way that they do it is that they let you revert a lot of those changes if you want to. So by default, there's the split notification control center thing that you find in iOS, but you can revert that back to the native Android version. All good. You can revert the home screen behavior if you want. There are a bunch of AI related tools that are extremely bad. You can turn them all off and just use the camera as you normally would. And yeah, in general, I think Oppo has kind of nailed the color science out of the box.
Yeah.
And because it leverages a lot of Google's integrated stuff, you can still use like Circle to Search, all the Gemini integrations, and anything in Google Photos, such as the new Magic Editor.
Right.
And then more than anything, I've just found that like the phone feels really nice to use. The battery life is exceptional.
Not surprised at all.
There's two sizes, which is interesting. They didn't make the Find X8 feel like a much cheaper product this year. It's a smaller product. It's like 0.2 of an inch smaller diagonally.
Yeah.
But the screen's basically the same, and it uses the same chip. It has the same primary ultra wide and 3x telephoto cameras. So it's just the 6x telephoto that it lacks. The sensor on the X8 it uses a slightly narrower aperture, but I believe the sensor itself is identical.
Yeah.
And it feels much more like an iPhone. So it's got these flat sides with a flat display. You pick it up, it looks like the new iPhone, whereas the X8 Pro has a curved display, curved sides. It just looks a bit more like an Android phone.
Right.
It's a bit more slippery as a result of that. But either way, like, you're getting a great device. It's just interesting here that Oppo came back to releasing this. Once it resolved all of its lawsuits with Nokia, it has now returned to the European market. It's not going to release this in the US, but it's coming to the West. And this is not the Find X8 Ultra, right? So they made this very clear. The sensors on the phone are smaller across the board than the Find X7 Ultra. That was a China-only release. So the photos themselves, especially in low light, or if you are looking for that bokeh effect, or you just like natural depth of field, you're not getting that here. But this is more than capable of standing up to most flagship devices. And as a result, it's a little thinner, it's a little lighter. It just feels a little bit more compact than something like the Find X7 Ultra. And yeah, you get like native Google integration, which you don't get on the Vivo X200 Pro or the Find X7 Ultra or the Xiaomi 15 Ultra or 14 Ultra. Like, well, actually, sorry, I think the 14s were released in the West, but the 15s haven't been announced for the West yet.
Right.
So right now, this is and like the 9400 is a great chip. It's really, really good. So all that being said, nobody's going to buy this in the US. It's just a really nice device that I would recommend if you could get it.
Yeah. Will back here one last time to sign off the show. Thank you again for listening. As always, me and Daniel and Jules are thankful for the Android Police listenership. It's a fun thing that we get to do once a week. So, if you're looking for the thing that's making us happy this week, it's you guys. It's our audience. So thank you very much. Stay tuned for a new episode next week. And until then, Have a good one. Bye.